Hello, it's me, Mike, with HPDS. I'm going to get into Genesis 4 Bible study. So I'll go ahead and start with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father who is in heaven, hallowed be thy name. May your kingdom come, may your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Please give us this day our daily bread and forgive us of our debt as we forgive those in debt to us. And Lord, lead us not into temptation, but rather deliver us from the evil one. For yours is the kingdom of power and glory, Lord, forever and ever. Amen. All right. So what I'll be getting into today is Genesis 4. In this video, it'll be Genesis 4. And what we're going to come across is we're going to come across Cain and Abel. We're going to come across the murder of Abel as committed by Cain. And that's what we're going to come across in chapter 4. Let's see. Chapter 4, Cain and Abel. Cain murders Abel. The Lord places a curse upon Abel. And then we've got the births of Seth and Enos. And that's what we're going to that's what we're going to read about in chapter 4. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and read chapter 4. And I'll go ahead and do this number where I give you that. Okay, and let's go to Genesis 4. So King James, Genesis 4. And Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain, and said, I've gotten a man from the Lord. And she again bare his brother Abel, and Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. And in process of time it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord. And Abel he also brought of the firstlings of his flock, and of the fat thereof. And the Lord had respect unto Abel and to his offering. But unto Cain and to his offering he had not respect. And Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell. And the Lord said unto Cain, Why art thou wroth, and why is thy countenance fallen? If thou doest well, shall not thou be accepted? And if thou doest not well, sin lieth at the door, and unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him. And Cain talked with Abel his brother, and it came to pass when they were in the field, that Cain rose up against Abel his brother, and slew him. And the Lord said unto Cain, Where is Abel thy brother? And he said, I know not. Am I my brother's keeper? And he said, What hast thou done? The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground. And now art thou cursed from the earth, which hath opened her mouth to receive thy brother's blood from thy hand. When thou tillest the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto thee her strength. A fugitive and a vagabond shalt thou be in the earth. And Cain said unto the Lord, My punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, thou hast driven me out this day from the face of the earth, and from thy face shall I be hid. And I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond in the earth, and it shall come to pass that every one that findeth me shall slay me. And the Lord said unto him, Therefore whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark upon Cain, lest any finding him should kill him. And Cain went out from the presence of the Lord, and dwelt in the land of Nod, on the east of Eden. And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bare Enoch. And he builded a city, and called the name of the city after the name of his son, Enoch. And unto Enoch was born Irad, and Irad begat Muhajael, and Muhajael begat Methusael, and Methusael begat Lamech. And Lamech took unto him 2 wives. The name of the one was Ada, and the name of the other Zillah. And Ada bare Jabal, and was the father of such as dwell in tents, and of such as have cattle. And his brother's name was Jubal, and his father was father of all such, and he was the father of all such as handle the harp and organ. And Zillah, she also bare Tubal Cain, an instructor of every artificer in brass and iron. And the sister of Tubal Cain was Naamah. And Lamech said unto his wife Ada and Zillah, Hear my voice, ye wives of Lamech, hearken unto my speech. For I have slain a man to my wounding, and a young man to my hurt. If Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech 70 and sevenfold. And Adam knew his wife again, and bare a son, and called his name Seth. For God said, she had appointed me another seed instead of Abel, whom Cain slew. And to Seth, to him also there was born a son, and he called his name Enos. Then began men to call upon the name of the Lord. So that is chapter 4 right there in its entirety. So now what I'll go ahead and do is I'll go ahead and explain it, go through it a little bit, go through the study. Let's see what we can remember. Basically, this is, like I said, the story of Cain and Abel. Cain murders Abel, as we saw. And then we see that the Lord places a curse upon Cain. And then we see Lamech and his 2 wives, which is an important step of what goes on with Cain's genealogy. And ultimately, Lamech is basically just a great, that sums up the line of Cain, is Lamech, and his saying that if Cain gets avenged 7-fold, and I get avenged 77-fold. And then we go back into the births of Seth and Enos at the end of the chapter, and basically that fills the void from the death of Abel and the loss of Cain. Because you got to remember, when Cain murders Abel, nothing happens to him. God, in fact, God protects him. God puts a mark on him and says that if anybody kills Cain, then he's going to get avenged by me, God, 7-fold. So God is basically saying, outright saying, vengeance belongs to me, no one else, even in such things as murder. So that's what we'll go ahead and get into. So let's go ahead and move into see what's going on with Cain and Abel here. So if we get back into it, we see Adam and Adam, and he knew Eve, his wife. So even right here, Adam knew is kind of talking when somebody knows somebody in the Bible that's biblically, that means they make, they're having sex, they're having children. She conceived and bare Cain, and so Cain was the firstborn here. And then Abel is the secondborn. So Cain is the firstborn. And Cain, once we start learning more, especially when we get into Abraham, we'll see that the firstborn is the heir. The firstborn is an heir. They get an heir. When somebody dies, they leave all of their things to their heir. And Abraham is, when we get into Abraham later on, he has a problem because he's 100 years old, and he's basically 98 years old, 99 years old, and he doesn't have an heir yet. And so God gives him a child in his, what we know to be an old age, but it's still a young age. But nonetheless, here we are seeing what becomes of the heir for Adam and Eve. So Adam and Eve sinned, and there's no 2 ways about it. Some people want to claim that they were innocent and that it was unjust for God to, bring death upon all of humanity just because Adam and Eve, ate of a fruit that they weren't supposed to eat of. And that's, people try to make it a light offense. Like there's no, it wasn't deserving. Like they want to say Adam and Eve were not deserving of death just for eating a plant. And I counter with, that's not what happened. What happened was they listened to a command that the one and only command. They could have done anything. They could have done whatever they wanted. There was just one command: do not eat of this plant because you will die. That is the command. That wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't even a penalty. It was telling you, if you eat of it, you're gonna die. It's poison. Don't eat the poison apple. Don't eat the poison. And what did they eat? They ate the poison. So they didn't believe God. It's not even like it was a commandment. It was more, it could have been, it was a commandment, but it was a commandment of truth. It was basically a fact. He was telling them it was a fact. If you eat of that, you're going to die. And then the serpent came and told them, that's not a real fact. That's a suggestion. You shouldn't eat of it. And God tells that because he doesn't want you to become more powerful than him or whatever. But it was just a statement of fact. It was the commandment. And the one thing they weren't supposed to do, and they did it. And that's, I mean, even in today's world, what do you tell you? I can tell you everything. The one thing I tell people not to do: don't commit murder. And people just may go out and commit murder. It happens. It's not something that doesn't happen. It happens. People do that, and they deserve everything that they get for committing these crimes. And Adam and Eve were no exception. But here they are. So Adam and Eve, once you realize that they deserved everything they got, you realize they weren't the best people. Adam and Eve, just like us, and in this day and age, they weren't the greatest, power couple to say. They weren't, Adam obviously had a problem where he was blaming things on his wife, and Eve was having problems with being gullible without, she wasn't a strong leader. She couldn't hold her own against a simple little snake. And she was hardly worthy of being called a great woman. And Adam was the same way. Hardly could be called a great man because of how he treated his wife, and Eve for how she was so naive and not a leader at all, not like a good mother. So they weren't the greatest parents, and it's obvious that they weren't the greatest parents because one of the first things that happens is that one child murders the other child. I mean, if you had a family and your child murders your other child, I'm sorry to say, you failed as a parent. And Adam and Eve are the same way. They failed as parents. Their first son murders their second son. That's, they couldn't control his emotions. They couldn't talk to him. He didn't know what was the right. They didn't explain to him. I mean, if they couldn't follow one little rule, how are they going to follow many rules of their own accord? You know what I'm saying? So obviously they probably weren't putting rules on their kids. Their kids were going out and just acting however they felt like it. And what was going on here? What was going on? Basically, Cain was a farmer, and right away, I mean, if you remember, did Adam not tell them? Did Adam not tell his son Cain, hey, by the way, I was cursed by God, and God cursed the ground because of what I did? But here Cain is, the oldest son, and what does he do? He becomes a tiller of the ground. So he probably isn't really paying attention here. He's shrugging off this curse that God placed upon him. He's not even caring about the curse. But Abel, on the other hand, was a keeper of sheep. So that's why when Cain brought the fruit of the ground, he offered it to the Lord. So he's got all his crops. And Cain comes with his crops and he says, here's my offering to the Lord. And Abel does the same with the flock and his firstlings and the fat thereof. And God respects Abel, but he doesn't respect Cain. Now, why do you think that is? There's no explanation. And people want to say, oh, the explanation is this. Cain was doing that. Abel was No, the explanation is obvious from chapter 3. The ground was cursed. You know what I'm saying? The ground was cursed. Where's it at? Cursed is the ground of the sake, and sorrow shall you eat of it, and in sorrow you shall eat of it. So why are you going to give God these cursed goods? I mean, he didn't curse the sheep. He cursed the serpents. Now, if Abel had come maybe with like a bunch of serpents to give God, maybe God would have been upset too. Or, he would have been like, why do I want all these serpents? Don't you know the serpent was just cursed above all the cattle? Everything is cursed. I mean, the serpent is cursed over everything. But the sheep wasn't cursed. But the ground was cursed. So Cain was giving God cursed materials. He was giving him the fruit of the ground. It was a curse. Here he goes. I'm cursing you, God, with my... Here you go. I'm not thinking about what's going on. Here's this curse, and I don't care about history. I don't care what happened to my parents. I don't care what they did. Here's some curses. I'm giving you some curses. Whereas Abel did not give him anything that was cursed. He gave him the firstlings. It was a proper offering, and Cain was bringing a cursed, which is an improper offering. He was slapping the face of God by doing this, by not listening to them. Just like Adam and Eve didn't listen to him about eating the plant, here Cain is not listening to him about the ground being cursed. So what are they doing? They're not listening. And if God is the Word was with God, and the Word was God, I mean, not listening to the word is going to get you in trouble. So that's what happened here. And that's why unto Cain in his offering he had no respect. And Cain was very wroth, and his countenance falls. So let's find out what countenance is. And wrath we can understand being very angry, very upset. So countenance, the look, the expression of the face. So his face fell, basically sad. And let's go ahead and look at wrath. He was angry, he was violent, so he became angry. Cain was very angry at God, and his countenance fell, and basically his appearance came down, like he was sad. Like he came and he brought what he thought was a good offering to the God, and God disrespects him, and Cain gets very angry, and he gets all sad. And God even says to him, why are you angry? Why are you sad looking? If you do well, shouldn't you be accepted? And if you don't do well, sin lieth at the door, and unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him. So God here is telling them, like, why are you getting mad? Don't you know I just told you that I just told all your whole family that the ground is cursed. That's not what you're doing isn't right. You're not doing what's right. And if you don't do what is well, then sin. So now you here, look at you. Here you are messing with curses, and sin is waiting at the door for you. And it's going to rule, and you get what I'm saying? But if you did do well, you see what I'm saying? And thou shalt rule over him. That's what he's telling him. He's telling him you're not paying attention. You're not listening. You're not doing what is right. But instead of turning around and saying, hey, you know what? The ground is cursed. God, I apologize. You know what? You're right. My parents ate, and they're going to die because of what they did, and their whole life is cursed because of that. And I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be cursed like that. I'm going to be more like my brother who did give you, they probably both, neither one would have known, obviously. I mean, at least Abel knew. Abel knew not to bring him fruits of the ground. He brought the flock, and he said, well, as far as I know, the flock isn't cursed, so I'm going to bring him some of my flock. And so, Cain could have said, well, I found out that the ground is cursed, so next time, instead of bringing cursed items to the Lord, I'll be more like my brother, and I'll bring one of the flocks. I'll do it like that instead. Instead of doing that, what does he do? Cain talks with Abel, and eventually, and it came to pass when they were in the field, Cain just rose up against Abel and killed him. Just slew him, just killed him. Out of nowhere, for Abel, he didn't see it coming. He just killed him. And again, here comes God, just like when Adam and Eve sinned, here's Cain sinning, and here comes God with the questions. There's a crime committed, here comes the police. The executive power over here. And the Lord said unto Cain, where is Abel thy brother? And of course Cain says, I don't know, am I my brother's keeper? And so he's real disrespectful. Cain does not care. Instead of being a righteous man, I mean, he's even worse off than his own parents were. I mean, Adam and Eve were bad enough for doing what they did. They were, bad people. You might think they're not people, but if the government tells you don't steal, and you go out and you steal, I mean, you could give me all the, you give me all the excuses in the world. Oh, this and that, and I still do this, and I just stole one thing. I'm not a bad person. No, you stole. You're a bad person. I mean, not like I haven't stolen either, and I'll tell you right now, I'm not the best person. I should probably be dead, and God will deal with me how he deals with me. And that's for him. So that's why we ask Lord, we ask Jesus that we not be counted in sins, because we're covered by his sins. And so like I said, it comes down to, if God was here and he was instead of what we have now, we're led by Satan, by the king of the air, which we'll find out much later. We'll see all these things much later in the Bible. But I mean, if we had submitted ourselves to God and God was our king right now, then I couldn't do anything without being punished. I couldn't do anything bad. I couldn't commit one sin. I couldn't drink a beer without getting cursed or getting destroyed by I couldn't eat too much. I couldn't be gluttonous. I couldn't overeat because God would come after me and something would happen to me immediately. I couldn't think. For example, it says later on, if you so much as hate your brother, then you have committed murder in the eyes of the Lord. So I couldn't even think a bad thought. I couldn't even hate somebody in my mind without God coming and saying, look, you murdered your brother. What have you done here? That's what God would do if he was completely our king. But he's not. We did not accept his kingship, and so he left, and that's why he sent Jesus Christ, his son, instead, so that Jesus will have the full authority, and that Jesus sits at the right hand. So now we have a man sitting at the right hand instead of the effervescent God, the all seeing God, the all being, the Alpha and the Omega. But but here we are. God, Cain, he knew it right away. God comes to Cain and he asks him, where's your brother? And Cain's all like, I don't know. He's being real sketchy. He's being a real criminal right here. He's being a real criminal. He's just lying. Outright lying. Just as bad as the serpent. Worse than the serpent. This guy was worse than the serpent. He killed somebody. And then he lied about it. And of course God knew, and he said, what hast thou done? The voice of thy brother's blood crieth. So what did you do? Your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground. Didn't I tell you the ground is cursed? Now the ground is screaming out to me again, calling about your brother's blood. And so then, of course, God, and now thou art cursed from the earth, which hath opened her mouth to receive thy brother's blood from thy hand. So now you too is what God is. So now you're cursed also, Cain. Cain is cursed. Now the ground was cursed. Now you're cursed. Man, Adam and Eve are cursed. And now here's the curse. The serpent was cursed. The ground was cursed. And now you're cursed, Cain. Here you are cursed. And when you till the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto thee her strength. A fugitive and a vagabond shalt thou be in the earth. So that's what he's telling him. He's telling him, you're criminal. Now you're a criminal, a fugitive and a vagabond. And what's a vagabond? Somebody who wanders around, right? With no purpose. No, let's go. Vagabond. A wandering from place to place without any settled home. Nomadic. Leading an unsettled or carefree life. Disreputable. Worthless. Shiftless. That's what a vagabond is, and that's what Cain was going to be. There's that curse of Cain. And you're a fugitive. And when you till the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto thee her strength. So now the ground was cursed. Now when you till the ground, you ain't even going to be able to yield what little strength it had left after its curse. And remember that the curse was against the ground, so that when you come back to chapter 3, what was the curse of Adam? See, thorns and thistles. So you're gonna eat from the ground in sorrow. It's gonna hurt, and you're gonna have thorns and thistles coming out of the ground, and that's how. And you're gonna sweat, and you're gonna have to work real hard to get that food, and then you're just gonna return to the ground. That was the curse, and now here the curse is even being intensified. Now it says, not only were they having a hard time with it to begin with, here it is, let's see. Now the ground won't even yield unto thee her strength. So now it's not even, so now where he goes, the ground doesn't even give him fruits, even when he tills it. So he's the kind of guy that he goes and he works the field, and he's so cursed that the ground won't even, give him anything. So this just, he's really cursed. Now he's really in trouble. He was there being a farmer, having a hard time farming as it was probably. And now God is saying you're cursed that you can't even be a farmer no more. He ain't even going to be able to get any of the ground. And now that the ground is weak. Shall not, wherever you go, it can't do anything for you. You're going to be a fugitive, or you're going to be wandering and a criminal. You're a wandering criminal from now on. And Cain says, and of course here comes another weak personality. Just like when God confronted Adam, Adam was all like, "Oh, that's the wife. The woman did it. I didn't do it. The woman made me. Punish her." Here, he was a weak man, and here he is passing on his weakness to his other son, Cain. And Cain is basically saying, my punishment is greater than I can bear. It's greater than I can bear, apparently. And behold, thou hast driven me out this day from the face of the earth, and from thy face shall I be hid, and I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond in the earth, and it shall come to pass that every one that findeth me shall slay me. So he's complaining that, I'm going to die. Somebody's going to come kill me. So this is a murderer, and that is that weak personality where a murderer does not want to be murdered. He's so scared, that he's going to get murdered that, even though that's what he did. He murdered his brother without thought, without consequence, without thinking about the consequences of his actions, without thinking about what it was going to do to his family. Mind you, never mind what happened to Adam and Eve. How do you think this made as a human couple, as a married couple, as man and wife, husband and wife? How do you think that made how do you think this how do you think this affected their relationship? I mean, in today's world, we know that, if you got money problems, you and your husband, you and your wife got money problems, I mean, that could break up a whole marriage just like that. The whole, I've seen it. I know it to be the case. I know firsthand that married couples have, all kinds of things get in the way of their marriage. Other people, other men, other women, finances, lack of respect, all kinds of things can mess with the marriage. Now, how do you think this messed with their marriage? Because it affected their marriage. I guarantee you it affected their marriage in one way or another. But you got to think about that. How do you think it would have affected the mother, Eve, whose beloved son was murdered by her other son? Her firstborn murders her secondborn, her baby boy. So her oldest boy murders her baby boy. How do you think that makes her feel? Especially when you take into consideration what had happened to them in the Garden of Eden and how they were cursed out there. You think she was very happy with Adam? A man that right away when trouble hits the fan, he blames her. And, because of the two of them, they get kicked out of heaven. And I know I've said before in a different one that it would have been akin to like a man losing his job because something that his wife and him did. So think, Adam would have been like the leader. He would have been the head servant. He would have had a job. He'd have been president of the company. And the CEO gets, then the president of the company gets fired because him and his wife go to dinner somewhere. Somewhere they weren't supposed to go to dinner for some reason, whatever, And then, of course, the CEO gets upset because, hey, we're over here and we're this business, and you went and you ate at our competitor's business, and everybody saw it, and you try to pretend like you're fired. Might seem silly today, but I mean, it was something definitely very, very. It's a visual. It was the leaders. It was something that a king, as Adam and Eve, they were basically like king and queen, and it was something that the leadership did wrong. And they got fired, and then suddenly they had a good job, and now they're poor and going homeless, and here they are now, they're poor and homeless, trying to do all the work that he can because he lost his good job. And maybe he was upset with her because that's how it sounded like in Genesis 3. Adam was definitely like pointing the finger at her. So when they get kicked out, who do you think, just like any married couple, how do you think that would affect them? You think, you get you and your husband and wife, you as husband and wife are living in a house and y'all get evicted, your home gets foreclosed on or something, and y'all go out, now you're homeless and you're struggling, and then all of a sudden y'all still have children. Now you got a kid, you got two kids, and you're homeless, you're struggling to live. And then, one of your kids goes ahead and kills your other kid, and he's just a bad kid. That Cain was a bad guy. He didn't even care. He was just a bad dude. He was a murderer. So who knows what else he was capable of? If he was capable of murdering, he's capable of stealing, capable of lying. I mean, he did lie as well. Capable of doing it again. You just couldn't trust him. Couldn't trust him no more. He was just a bad guy. And so now this couple's got a bad guy as their kid, and this kid now he's missing. And look at how weak he was. Like I said, he's still the weakest guy there is. He's just what I would call what could be rightfully called just a loser. He's a loser that can't take his punishment. He gets driven. He tells them, "Oh, that's the big one right there." What does it say? My punishment is greater than I can bear. My punishment. That's weak. My punishment. I'm not. It's not worth it. It's not fair. It's not fair. That would have been Cain crying like a little loser. But of course, God, being the Lord, being perfect and righteous and knowing and being and by righteous, the word righteous means just being right, and never mind the that he's right morally. He's just right in general. Just like if I said 2 + 2 is 4, that's right. That's correct. That's righteous. Knowing that 2 + 2 is 4, righteous. That's righteousness. He was right. God was always right. He was always correct. He did not lie. Everything he said was the truth. And this guy here is very unrighteous, obviously. But God was righteous, and the fact was that the only law that had been given at this point in time was the law to not eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That was the only law they had, and that law was that if you eat of that, you surely will die. That day you will surely die. And we're still in the 6th day, and it does come to pass that eventually Adam and Eve do die, and they die during the history of the 6th day, even though God is in the 7th day, and we see the sun and the moon pass by us over and over. And so because, we see days and we got calendars and we're always seeing time pass, we think it's hard to understand that we're still only living in the 6th day. Today is the 6th day of existence, even though we're used to saying that every 24 hours is a day, and that there's been countless days since the beginning of existence. There's been countless 24-hour periods. That sun has run around in its circuit, in its race, many, many countless times, but we're still only living in the 6th day of existence. You have to keep that in mind. That's the fact, that's the truth, that's the way it's written. And here we are in the 6th day. And at this point during the day, they had not yet been informed of all the laws. They were only informed of that one law that says they would die that day. So they were all going to die on the 6th day. They were not going to make it into the 7th day where God rests. And God is in the 7th day resting. But what does God say? So since they had not been, they hadn't been given that law, like the Israelites were given the 10 commandments. Thou shalt not murder. They hadn't been given these commandments yet. They hadn't been told not to murder. So God, of course, puts a mark in him. Instead, he's basically marking him for a later time. And he's saying, I will have vengeance on Cain. Me, God, Lord says that. Therefore, whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark upon Cain, lest any finding him should kill him. So God, in his perfection, in his righteousness, said, you know what? I haven't told y'all not to murder yet. So here I am saying, instead of telling you not to murder, because that's not what he was doing, he was going to get to that. In this one, he's got something else that he's got to preface the murder and everything. All the law, he says, first, before I give you the guys the law, I'm going to put this mark on Cain. And now this is the second law given, basically. Now the first law was don't eat of the forbidden fruit. Now here's the second. Well, now that's an impossibility because God has taken that fruit away altogether. So now here's the second law that is mentioned in the Bible. And it's basically whoever kills Cain, I will take vengeance on him sevenfold. So, and it doesn't really tell us that anybody kills Cain, but who knows? Chances are it probably happened. I'm sure the people were so violent back then that I'm sure somebody tried to kill Cain, or somebody may have actually killed Cain. Who knows? I don't know. It's not written. It's history that only God knows right now. And maybe the people that were there to do it too. But so he puts a mark on Cain and then he tells them, so the whole world knows no one can kill this man, even though he is the biggest murderer. He's the biggest criminal out here right now. He's the big time criminal. But God will have my vengeance on him. God said that I will have my vengeance on him in my due time. And so that's when Cain leaves the presence of the Lord and he dwells in the land of Nod in the east of Eden. So I don't really know where the land of Nod is. It could have been this land of Nimrod, perhaps, right around that same. It's out in the east of Eden, or I'm not really sure. It's something I got to take a look at, and if anybody knows, I'd love to hear it. I'd love to see some maps of where this could be, but I don't really know where it's at. But that's where Cain goes. He goes out to the east, and then Cain, just lo and behold, he's even given his own wife. And she conceived and she bare Enoch. And he has a city and he calls that city after the name of. So even God, Cain here is learning that, hey, Cain loves his child. He's got a son and he loves him so much that he names the whole city after his son, Enoch. So you got to wonder what he was learning about his own parents. Like he's got to put himself now. Cain has to put himself into the shoes of his own father, Adam. So he could feel like, well, what's it like to have a boy, to have a son of your own? And then here goes more of Cain's line. Enoch, Irad beget Mehujael, Mehujael beget Methusael, and Methusael beget Lamech. And these names are familiar. I'll bring them up when I go over chapter 5 again, because in chapter 5 you see that Enoch is the same name of somebody else that comes out right here. If you see the line of Seth had his own children, and we find that the names of the children of Seth are closely related to these names of Cain. They got real similar names, and they even have names that are exactly the same. And it's because Cain, at this point, you got to keep in mind, he was separated from the world. He was a vagabond and a fugitive. So whoever he took for his wife would have been, and granted, once again, it doesn't tell us where his wife comes from, but you can imagine that Adam and Eve were having a bunch of children because of their age, and on top of that, she could have just been the first one, and when they were given the skins, they were basically given the bodies of the parents of the human race, even though at that point they could have already had many human beings. There could have already been a lot of human beings. But the king and queen of the human beings would have been sacrificed as hosts, and that would have been the flesh, that would have been the clothing of flesh that was put upon the light, the Adam and Eve that were light creatures. They were trying to hide their light with the fig leaves. So God probably just covered them entirely and made them permanent. Their hosts were permanent hosts of theirs. They were basically thrown into jail in the form of human bodies, of which these humans could have already had a very long line of people, and they would have all been probably living. They would have all been immortal. And then Adam and Eve would have been flung into the king, the first one. That's why he would have called her Eve. She was basically the woman that gave birth to all the other kids, all the other humans. And that's why they were given the bodies. They're those particular bodies, because they were the firsts. And it was suitable for them. But it doesn't mean that they came into existence, into their sinful bodies. It doesn't mean that there wasn't already a whole earth filled with human beings. Because it could have been so. And so Cain could have had his choice of all types of other people, or it could have been just as simple as incestual, where Cain took for himself a sister, just his next sister. He just took off with her. And of course, that's why he says he has his own children, and he has children, and he loves his own children. And you see what happens. He's got kids, he's got grandchildren, he's got great-grandchildren, and so forth. But his line is so bad because this is just the continuation of bad parenting. These are bad parents right here. Adam and Eve were not good parents. They messed up. Not that they were evil parents, but they were definitely not good. They weren't the best parents. They weren't, they weren't teaching their children properly, because they themselves at that point, they were just dumb animals at this point. They lost the knowledge that was given to them, the knowledge of God. God was there to answer any questions at any time. He could have, and here they are without that, and they're just basically dumb animals. That's why they're really early humans, and we all, everybody knows early humans to not be the smartest people entirely. We called them caveman, we called them Neanderthals, and basically it's like the same thing as just calling them stupid. Not that they were stupid, but they were definitely lacking all the knowledge that we have today. They did not have the chance to learn everything. They didn't figure it out yet. God hadn't given them the laws. God didn't give them the words. They were just trying to figure things out, and God was coming in and trying to help them every now and then, or as often as He could, as long as they would let Him help them. But here we got Lamech, and Lamech takes 2 wives. So never mind having one wife like Adam and Eve did, and Adam had one wife, Cain had one wife. Here's Lamech, he's just completely, he's all whatever. I'm gonna take 2 wives, and he gets 2 wives, and then he tells you he's even worse than Cain all of a sudden, because Lamech says to his 2 wives, "Hear my voice, ye wives of Lamech. Hearken to my speech, for I have slain a man to my wounding." So he's admitting murder right there. He's saying, I kill people. He goes, I've killed a man for hurting me, for wounding me, and a young man just for hurting me. So this one guy wounded me, this guy just hurt me, and I killed him. I've slain them, I've killed him. So he's killed. At least twice he killed. And if he was that's what he's saying. He's so quick to kill. I kill you just for hurting me. So who knows how vicious Lamech would have been. Lamech would have been somebody. That's what he says. And if Cain shall be avenged 7-fold, truly Lamech 70 and 7-fold. He's saying, if anybody kills Cain, they're gonna get avenged 7-fold. He's saying I'm even worse than Cain. He was proud of being worse than Cain. He was calling himself vicious. He was calling himself violent. This is that bad behavior, that bad, I would call it like gangster mentality. We got thug mentality is what this is. This guy was a thug. He was just a bad guy. And this was his mentality. His mentality was like, you so much as, hurt me, I'm going to kill you. I mean, if you look at me wrong, I might hurt you. That's what kind of guy Lamech was. And that comes from Cain. And that's kind of where it ends with the line of Cain, where it just talks about that. It just talks about how Cain's line was just getting worse and worse and more violent. And it's obvious that that's what was happening. And then the last 2 verses here in chapter 4, verses 25 and 26, is talking about how Adam knew his wife again, and she bare a son. And this one was called Seth. And the reason why his name was Seth, Eve names him Seth, apparently, and she says, "For God, said she hath appointed me another seed instead of Abel, whom Cain slew." So his name was called Seth because God had appointed her another seed instead of Abel, another heir. So now she has a new heir. They have a new heir. And then also to Seth, to him also was there born a son. His name was Enos, and you notice that Seth had a son named Enos, whereas Cain had a son named Enoch. So they're very similar. See how Seth has a kid named Enos? Cain has a kid named Enoch. And it's saying that at this point, then began man to call upon the name of the Lord. So apparently Adam and Eve took the cue. It took them 3 kids. It took them to the 3rd son for them to understand that, hey, maybe we should be telling them everything about God, and maybe we should be praying and calling for God, because God, even though He kicked us out of the garden, He still wants us to call upon Him, and we're the ones not calling upon Him. We're trying to do things on our own because they must have been prideful or something for having been kicked out of the garden. So so basically, just like I was saying, how it could be, you could think of it like Adam had a really good job, and he was maybe the president of a company, and then the CEO fires him, but The CEO is all like, if you ever need anything, come to our offices. We'll help you guys out. Even though we had to fire you, it was kind of like a publicity stuff and some of that. But I, as the CEO, still love you guys. You guys are part of my family. You guys are my, my people, your family, and just because you can't work for me no more, I could definitely help you out. That's kind of like that's what God was doing. Like, I'll help you out. Just come to me. And Adam and Eve were kind of so prideful that when it came to Cain and Abel, they didn't go to God. It doesn't say that they did. It doesn't say that they prayed for their children. It doesn't say that Abel intervened and said, "Hey, Cain, you're doing this wrong. Don't be acting like this." No, that's not what happened. It wasn't until Seth that Adam and Eve clearly said, "You know what? We better start calling upon the name of the Lord." And so Seth starts getting it right. Seth was probably a much better child than Cain was. But I'm going to go ahead and end it right there. And yeah, I'll end it right now. This is the end of chapter 4 of Genesis. It's the end of chapter 4. And next time I'll get into chapter 5. And chapter 5 is after Cain and Abel, obviously, and it's getting close to the flood. The flood comes up in chapter 6. But in chapter 5, what are we going to see? We're going to see basically the genealogy of the patriarchs. So we're going to see what's going on between how old they start living, and then we'll start seeing all the children of Seth, and we'll see how some of their children's names are very similar to the names of Cain. And you'll see that's because Cain more than likely was a vagabond. He was a fugitive. He was outside looking in on these guys. He wasn't allowed to be with them anymore. He was a criminal. God had sent them away. They were gone. But that doesn't mean Cain didn't miss these guys. He didn't think about them. He went and was probably looking at them and naming his own children after the children of Seth, sort of in that same way. But we're going to lead up to Lamech on Seth's side, whereas Lamech on Cain's side was the kind of guy that, on Cain's side, he was a bad dude that we just saw Lamech. He's that Lamech that was like, "Oh, I'll kill you just for hurting me." Whereas on Seth's side, we're going to have Lamech, who was basically the father of Noah. And Noah was he was a righteous guy there. That was a righteous guy compared to this unrighteous Lamech. And even though they got the same kinds of names, you'll see that that's what's going on, is that you got the evil side basically mirroring the good side, or you could even say it's the opposite, where the good side is God is mocking the evil people, because Lamech, on Seth's side, the good Lamech, he lived 777 years old. Whereas Lamech on the bad side was just basically saying, "I get avenged 77 times." Well, God said, "Well, guess what? My guy lives to 777 years old." It's that number that, he's just mocking each other there. He's mocking them. He's telling them, he's showing them that I am greater than the evil ones. And God is greater than the evil ones. And, we'll keep looking for that. So, I want to go ahead and God bless anyone who may be watching. And I pray that we all bless Jesus Christ, and may Jesus Christ bless all of us. Amen.